Good morning, students. So today we are going to cover the next topics of the digestive system. Let's start from swallowing and peristalsis. In swallowing, there are several simultaneous actions. So the first one is tongue. So the tongue presses upward and back against the roof palate of the mouth, and this forces the bolus. Suppose if this is the bolus into the throat or pharynx. This part is the pharynx. So food moves inward. Next, the back part of the root of the mouth cavity called soft palate closes the opening between the throat and the nasal passage. The larynx, also called voice box, which is located at the entrance of the windpipe, this one is the windpipe, is pulled upward to bring it close to the back of the tongue. When a flap called epiglottis closes its opening. Thus, the only passage available to the swallowed food is that of the esophagus, this chamber. Next is peristalsis. So, once the food reaches the esophagus, it is conducted behind by a special movement called peristalsis. Peristalsis is the wave of constriction caused by the circular muscles of the gut pushing the food along. Here you can see the food is pushing downward, and these are the wave of constriction and the wave of relaxation. So as the wave passes, the circular muscles relax. Peristalsis occurs through all the regions of the gut. Next is esophagus. So esophagus is a tube which simply conducts the food from the throat to the stomach. Esophagus does not produce any digestive enzymes. Next is stomach. So stomach is an elastic bag located below the diaphragm. In an average adult, it can hold 2 to 3 liters of food. Its walls are highly muscular and churn the food thoroughly to mix with gastric juice secreted by the inner lining. The opening of the stomach into the intestine is called Pylorus. It has a ring of muscles to keep the opening closed like a valve to prevent food passing from the stomach until it is thoroughly churned. Even a similar sphincter termed cardiac sphincter is present at the front end of the stomach to prevent backflow of food into the esophagus. The inner lining of the stomach produces gastric juice. It is a colorless, highly acidic liquid containing water, some salts, hydrochloric acid, that is HCl, and an enzyme called pepsin. So the acid serves two functions, that is HCl. First of all, it kills any germs which may have entered along with the food. And the second one is it activates the enzyme called pepsin to act on proteins. At first, the pepsin is secreted as pepsinogen, which is the inactive form, which is then activated by the acid, that is HCl, into pepsin, which is the active form. And after that, the enzyme pepsin digests protein, almost 20% protein, into peptides. Another one is prorenin, which is the inactive form and become activated when come in contact with HCl and become active, that is renin. And this enzyme renin digests the milk protein and convert it into paracasein. The food stays in the stomach for about 3 hours and it attains a pulp-like form called chyme. And then the pylorus opens intermittently to allow chyme to move into the intestine, little by little. The next part is small intestine, which is a tube about 7 meters long and about 2.5 centimeters wide. It is coiled and folded in the abdomen. Small intestine is divided into 3 subregions. The first one is duodenum. It is a short upper part next to stomach. The common bile duct, as you can see here, opens into this part. The next short region of about 2 meters is called jejunum. And the last part is ileum, which is about 4 meters long. The inner lining of the ileum is produced into a great number of tiny finger-like projections called villi. So the villi enormously increases the inner surface area of the intestine nearly about 8 times that of the outer body surface, which facilitates the absorption of digested food. Each villus is covered by a single cell thick epithelium. Inside the villus are contained an artery, a vein, interconnecting blood capillaries, and a lymph vessel called lacteal. The small intestine serves both for digestion and absorption. So the absorption mainly takes place in the small intestine. It receives 2 digestive juices, that is bile and pancreatic juice, in the duodenum. And its own walls secrete the intestinal juice in the ileum. Next is adaptations of the ileum for absorption of digested food. As it is very long and provide more surface area, the large number of villi further increase the surface area for absorption in ileum. It contains single cell epithelium lining. It is narrow for slow movement of food, allowing absorption. Now let's read about the 2 digestive juices. The first one is bile. It is a yellowish green watery fluid produced in the liver. The pancreatic duct opens into the duodenum by an aperture common to that of bile duct. The pancreatic juice contains 3 kinds of enzymes. They are amylopsin, trypsin and steapsin. So amylopsin, also called pancreatic amylase, digests leftover starch into maltose. Trypsin acts on the remaining proteins and polypeptides to produce small peptides and amino acids. And steapsin, which acts on emulsified fats to split them into fatty acids and glycerol. So here is the overall role of pancreatic enzymes. So the first one is trypsinogen, as trypsin is first secreted as inactive trypsinogen, which is activated to trypsin by an enzyme enterokinase. Next is intestinal juices, which is secrete from the ileum. Intestinal juice contains eripsin, also called peptidase, that convert remaining peptides into amino acids. Intestinal juice also secrete enzyme, that is maltase, that digest maltose into glucose. Next is sucrase, also called invertase, splits sucrose into glucose and fructose. Lactose, which is a milk sugar, splits into glucose and galactose by the action of the enzyme called lactase. And some traces of lipase digest fat into fatty acid and glycerol. The final products of food are mainly absorbed in the intestine itself. The amino acids and simple sugars such as glucose, fructose, galactose have relatively small sized molecules which are absorbed through the thin epithelium of the villi and reach their blood capillaries to finally enter the blood circulation. First, to reach the liver through the hepatic portal vein. Next, fatty acids and glycerols, which cannot absorb by the capillaries, are mainly absorbed into the lymph vessel or the lacteal, which is present in the villi in small intestine, to enter the lymphatic system, which forms a network all over the body to ultimately empty its content into the bloodstream. The food passes very slowly through the intestine, taking about 4 hours to enter the last part, that is large intestine. On the next video, we will see about the structure and functions of large intestine.